One of the most disturbing elements of the Prohibition War is how it's made police the enemy of otherwise law-abiding cannabis consumers. Fortunately, one group of police officers knows the futility of prohibition and reaches out to educate the community and current law enforcement. Today, the Russ Belville Show visits with another speaker from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition with one clear message: cops say legalize drugs.
Welcome back, everyone. Half past, and joining us by telephone, we've got Leigh Maddox from Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Leigh, welcome to the show. Hello, Leigh. Do we have you? Oh, let's see if we can get Leigh back on the phone. She was just on the line there, and looks like she just dropped off. May have been unsure of how we were connecting, but we'll make sure we get her on the line. Of course, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, you can find them at leap.cc, and they are the leading law enforcement organization speaking out against the war on drugs in all its facets. Leigh, do we have you on the line?
You do. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, Leigh. Thanks for joining us here on the show. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm just looking at your bio, and I see that you're a former special assistant state attorney and a retired state police captain. You worked as a patrol trooper, as a supervisor. You worked undercover infiltrating the Ku Klux Klan, and then you were a coordinator for the racial profiling consent decree in Baltimore, I believe. I couldn't have picked a better guest to have on given the events of the past couple of weeks, and I was wondering if maybe you could speak to us from your experience and what you see going down in the growing awareness of police militarization and abuse of citizens.
Yeah, so thanks for having me on, and I'm happy to be here. My career was fascinating, and everything you described, guilty as charged, did all that and a little bit more. But seeing things unfold through the eyes of the community in Ferguson and how that's played out nationwide, and sort of shifting the dialogue and raising awareness about police militarization and how scary that really is, you kind of tease that out to the long term. It's all very, very problematic, and I view this actually as a wonderful opportunity to engage, and I hope that this moment doesn't slip by like it has so many times previously.
Yeah, and I know that, we like to, in drug policy reform, we look at this and we see it through the drug war lens. I see a whole bunch of correlations and how the drug war has led to this militarization and this treatment of citizens as, the occupied country rather than, protect and serve the citizens kind of situation. But I am curious about something. In the protests that we've seen in Ferguson, now in New York over Eric Garner, one of the chants that comes up is no justice, no peace, no racist police. Is there an element of racism in our police, either in our structures or in some of the people that are choosing to become police officers? Or is this really more systemic than it is personal?
So I struggled with this for years because my department was accused back in the early 1990s of racial profiling. And I worked with those brave men and women, and I thought, they're not racist. I talk to them every day. They're not. But the more I got into the background and got to see the systems and the systemic collateral consequences that flow from just a simple marijuana arrest, that's when I saw, okay, now it's not explicit bias. It's implicit bias plus a systemic problem that sets people up for failure.
There's a hashtag that's trending on social media right now, criming while white. And it's in response to this where white folks have been putting up in Twitter the crimes they committed and how leniently they were treated by police officers when they committed those crimes, when the implication would be if a black person did the same thing, they'd have been arrested, thrown down, handcuffed, all of that. Did you see anything like that in your career where there was a very disparate treatment of subjects by race?
I didn't necessarily see that during my career, but I have witnessed the stories that have come out of my clients in Baltimore City, and trust me, and you can read the reports from the ACLU, if I know you have, and there's definitely a desperate impact that has occurred. The question is, why has that occurred? And I think a lot of it, quite frankly, goes right back to our hiring practices. I mean, like here in Maryland, you can't be hired if you've ever been arrested for anything, pretty much. You can't be hired if you've used marijuana more than X times. You can't be hired if you've used cocaine more than, maybe once. you can't be hired if you ever used LSD or mushrooms or PCP. And so we're hiring choir boys essentially, and a lot of them are Vietnam vets, or not Vietnam vets, but vets who have other ancillary, PTSD issues they bring to the game. And that whole, kind of pot that we're mixing it all up in is just creating not such a good relationship between the police and the community, because the police, quite frankly, don't represent the community.
And of course, like I mentioned earlier, I see a lot of this through a drug war lens, and I see how, the mass incarceration pretty much started around the same time Nixon said, go after the hippies. And there's so much of the drug war that's entrenched in this. But do you see the drug war as just a tool that further exacerbates an already broken system, or is the drug war itself, if we fix that, it's going to fix a large part of the system?
So both, but I think I tend to go with the latter. I think that if we can figure our way out of this drug war maze, that I think that the rest of the stuff will be more manageable. I think it's going to take probably about 60% of the work out of the federal and state and municipalities if done correctly, and that will give those employees more time to focus on the stuff that we really should be caring about, like, putting murderers away, and
maybe a Wall Street banker or two.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Leigh Maddox. She's a retired captain for the Maryland State Police and a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. They have a great stable of fantastic speakers who can speak with gravitas toward the issue of ending the war on drugs. You can find out more at leap.cc. Now, Leigh, I'd also like to ask about policing the police. I think one of the things that's gotten people really upset, and more so in this Eric Garner case since there's videotape, is where we seem to see that just about any action by a police officer against a subject can be excused through the grand jury process and through a feeling of, well, the police thought they were threatened and they thought they were, in danger. What sort of changes are we going to have to implement to see better policing of the police?
Well, one, I think we need to, again, go back to our hiring standards, and we need to start hiring people that are actually connected to the community and not from different areas. Two, training is tremendously important. We need to keep training officers and bring the community into the training so that there can be some sort of relationship on the front end. And then, it's a hard nut to crack. The divide is so big. I struggle with how are we ever going to write it? In Baltimore, we're talking a lot about body cameras. Yet another layer of technology. Is that going to actually make things more transparent, or even though there's a video, the grand jury is still not going to indict, and that's a really scary thing, because grand juries are secret, and they're very different than the jury of your peers. That's a public sort of venue. It's very troubling.
Yeah, I can't understand why there isn't, in a situation where the state kills a citizen, there should automatically be a trial. I don't even see how we even have a decision as whether there should be one. This is the state killing a citizen. I think that's the most serious thing. Let me ask you about another angle on this, and this is the militarization of the police. This came to most people's attention through the Ferguson protest, but those of us in the drug war, this is like old hat to us. We recognize this for a long time ago. And in response to this, President Obama said, pretty much indicated that we're not going to change the program. We're still going to get this stuff to the cops, this military gear, but they might have to fill out more paperwork and have a little more oversight. Doesn't that seem like it's kind of ignoring what the real problem is, and that is equipping our police like a military force?
Yes, it does. And, not too very long ago, just before Ferguson broke, I had some friends over who are assistant police chief, just, hanging out at the house, and they're like, Leigh, man, the state wants to give us this equivalent of a tank, right? And it's a very small police department. I was like, well, what are you going to do with it? He said, well, we're going to spray paint our colors on it. I was like, yeah, but can't you just say no? Because, they don't have the infrastructure to be able to maintain it and train properly. And then, heaven forbid, stuff hits the fan and you can't actually execute in a way that's respectful to the community. And we saw that in Ferguson. everything after those first 2 shots, it was all just downhill.
Yeah, John Oliver did a fantastic segment showing one local police department, a small-town police department, spinning wheelies in a military armored vehicle that they had just received through some of these drug war grants. And it seems, these military grants, and it just seems so over the top to think that, a place like Keene, New Hampshire needs to be prepared against, terrorist attack and IEDs or something like that. Oh,
exactly. And don't get me wrong. There is a place, when we get big mall shootings or school shootings or, mass sort of, like the Boston Marathon, there is a place when police need to be, present and engaged and there. Mm-hmm. But it's not the everyday. We used to hide in the bunkers during the protests. We only came out when it got really bad. We would just kind of hunker down as police and let people, speak and let them voice their objections. That's kind of embedded in our Constitution, and I hate to see us get away from that.
Yeah, it's such a shame. And a final question here, Leigh, as we move forward and we're trying to address these issues between police and the citizenry, what would you suggest that the average listener out there, the average citizen, could do to help move this along?
Pay attention, read from multiple sources, make your own opinion, and engage your local politicians at every level.
There you go. Get involved, get engaged, let them know you're watching, let them know you care. Remember that you can film cops. It's perfectly legal as long as you're not interfering with them. And put a password on your cell phone. They need a warrant to get into it then. Leigh Maddox is a retired captain from the Maryland State Police and a speaker for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Any final thoughts, Leigh, before we go?
Just thank you, Radical Russ. It's great to be on your show.
Oh, thank you, Leigh. We'll get to meet in person someday soon, I'm sure.
No, we did. We met in Portland, Patients at a Time.
That's right, Patients at a Time conference.
At the Cannabis Cafe, remember? That was a blast.
Well, I have trouble sometimes remembering what happened at the Cannabis Cafe. I don't know why. Thanks, Leigh, so much for joining us. All right, when we come